I just want to thank you for inviting us to be here with you tonight and to give this presentation on the work in the Ukraine. This month is our 25th anniversary. 25 years we've been going there, so I'm going to give you the history. And I'll try not to take more than an hour and a half for covering 25 years. No, I won't. It's going to be short. If I can get this thing to work. Well, I know. You know, if you put this little thing in there, it works a lot better.
But Pat, you need a microphone?
So, no, I don't. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. Can everyone hear me all right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. All right, now, come on. There we go. Okay. Back in 1991, most of you, a lot of you remember Elder Arthur today. And Brother Arthur was the spokesman for the Lighthouse Radio Bible Study. And I was the announcer. And we had been working together for several years on that. And it was going by shortwave to the Ukraine and to the city of Donetsk. And we had one man that heard the program over shortwave. And he wrote us a letter. This was pre-computer days. So he wrote us a letter. And he was wanting to know if we could send him some literature, send him Bibles, clothes for the needy. So we gathered up a lot of clothes and shipped about 3 or 4 boxes of clothes to him. The Bibles was going to be another story, but we did get to find out where we could purchase Bibles in Ukraine, pay for them in South Carolina with the Slavic Bible Society, and then they would get the Bibles to them. So that was our start. And we went back and forth for over a year with him with snail mail. And then finally, Arthur and I said, well, let's make a survey trip. And 92, we sent the clothes. 93, we made our first survey trip to the Ukraine. And we met with that brother. There was a group of 10 of us that went. We met with him, and we met with him. He probably met us for maybe 2 more years. We were introduced to the church that Sasha was a member of, Light of Resurrection. And the very first Sunday we went there. We were there, we were asking him. Now there was a group of us in his home. There were 40 of us in a room that was probably 15 by 20. So you can imagine. They had the boxes of Bibles that had been shipped to him. They were all around the wall. People are sitting on the couch. They're sitting on boxes of Bibles. They're standing. And we met with him for 3 days, probably 3 to 4 hours, just talking, talking scripture, talking just information. So that Sunday we went to the church where Sasha was a member. First time I met him was that Sunday afternoon. And get this now, he had just been married the day before. He was at church that Sunday, and he and his wife, Tanya, were headed off to the mission field in Russia that afternoon. So that's the kind of fellow that we've been knowing and thanking the Lord for all of these years. He doesn't like for me to tell all these things about him, but I want you to know. So we started that way. We did the survey trip. We decided there was so much to do. And as we went to the church, we met with the pastor there and some of the deacons. And so we decided we needed to, to make an effort to come back. So we went back the next year. In 1997, we started medical clinics. And I think it was 98 or 99, though, wasn't it? Because you had just moved back there. We started the medical clinics. And these medical clinics have just been such a blessing to people. Just this last year, for instance, in November, when we had the medical team, they saw in 7-8 days, they saw 950 patients. And the way it is so blessed now, because we can buy medicines over there, their medicines, and we can have enough money, the Lord willing, that we can always leave medicines or leave money, and we have personnel there that can follow up, and they keep records. Everyone that comes for medical help, they have a record of them, what they took, what they need, what their problems are. So they're able to help them. They're able to continue the service. And that's been a great blessing to be able to do that. So 2018, as I said, this is our 25th anniversary. One of the first projects that we took on in what was it, 94, 95, was the building of a church at the town of Ugladar. We were the first Americans to ever go to that church. It was a little church, had just gotten started. They were meeting in an apartment. Satanism was so strong in that town that they had an apartment building and they had a library. Most all these little churches that started out, they started with a library, with materials to give out to people. And someone had set off a bomb in their library just a couple of weeks before we got there. But they needed a church, so we helped to build the church. And that cost, back then, they said they needed $40,000. We raised the $40,000. They get the building up, nearly finished. And of course, you know how construction is. It's the same over there as here. It's never going to cost what they tell you it's going to cost, you know. So anyway, we wound up about $60,000 into that building, that church building. And we'll talk more about Sasha will talk more about the pastor in a little bit. So we started that. Then in Makifta, that's where Light of the Resurrection Church and Mission is located and still is located. We built the third floor to the mission building. They purchased a two-story old school that had been closed down. And so Sasha's thinking was if we could put a third floor on top, then we'd make that into rooms, you know, like apartment, and then have bathrooms. And that way, like our group, we stayed there for 10, 12 years after it was built when we make our trips. So that was a great blessing. Well, that money, we were trying to figure how are we going to pay for that third floor. It's going to be about $30,000 to $40,000. And we don't like to hear of churches closing down, do we? But the Plant City Church in Florida closed down, and they gave us the money to add that floor. So, you know, I like to think, and here's one of the things that go along with that. I was pastor at Plant City for 5 years, and when they disbanded, they gave me the communion set. And that communion set is in Ukraine today and is being used. The communion set from the Delray Beach Church, I received that too. That's over there. So I like to think that those two churches haven't really died in some way, you know, and that they're the thoughts of them is being carried on. That just thrills me. So we did that, and then also there at the mission building, we helped build the church and the clinic building. And the idea was when you come up to that building, it's kind of in an L like this, and you walk in the middle. And Sasha and I had talked about it. You know, when we look at the Lord and what the Lord, how He ministered to people, He met physical needs and He met spiritual needs. And that was the idea behind the clinic and the church. That here's the physical need can be helped here, the spiritual need is here. And so that was and I wish I had a picture. I didn't think of getting a picture of that to show you. Over the 25 years, DMI has been able to support more than 25. I didn't get a full count, but more than 25 pastors have been helped through our ministry. When we first started, when Sasha came along and we saw what was happening, it seemed like when we first went over there, they were just out of communism. 1991 was perestroika. So there was the freedom. And they were just, they were like brand new in getting into things. Not everybody was underground. Most of the churches were underground because they were illegal. But now that they were out, main thing they did was distribute literature. And so when they started, their attitude was because of communism, socialism, everybody owed them. The government took care of everything. And so when we get over there, their thinking is, okay, these Americans, they're going to do everything for us. They're going to build our churches, and we'll give them all these massive plans, and they're going to build our churches for us. But Sasha, with his thinking is, that's not what we need to do. We need to support these pastors so that they can be full-time in their ministry. And so that's what we started doing. And I know for several years we were supporting up to 20 at one time. Now, here was the support of a pastor back then. $120 a month. That was a good salary. $120 a month. And the way we did it was like our Primitive Baptist Foundation has done in helping support pastors. The full amount the first year, 2/3 the second year, 1/3 the third year, and then it was over. But they were being taught their responsibility to care for their pastor. And so they weren't going to be dependent on us. So when we dropped it 1/3, they were to take up that third. And that principle seemed to work. That seemed to, and so the people they had to be taught, you know. So that's been our main work for these years. And we're building a church today, and we'll show you some pictures of it. In fact, the Lord willing, we're going to have the dedication of that church when we go over in October. We're going over the end of October, and the Lord willing, we're going to have the dedication. It has been wonderful to see how everything has worked together with this little church. And we'll talk about that later in just a few minutes. Sasha will talk to you about that. So that's just some of our history. You know, I could go on and on with just all of the marvelous things that have happened. But the main thing that is important to me is the people whose lives have been changed. The people that have been affected. And that's what it's about. It's not about church buildings. And in fact, what's interesting today is we don't see them building these big, massive churches. They buy a house and renovate it, and that becomes a church. And they're smaller congregations, but you know, that has become the church in most of the instances. And it's just wonderful to see everybody is, I say that and then I tell you we're building a church. But when you hear what's happening with this church compared to the $60,000 in one 25 years ago, you'll see a big difference in what's happening here. So I just wanted to give you that little bit of history. One thing I will, when we first started years ago, most of you will remember, we were called the Donetsk Ministry Incorporated, DMI. When the war came in 2014, and those regions that are now under Russian occupation, their occupation, that's where we were for 23 years. And then when they took over, we couldn't go back in there. In fact, Sasha can't go back in there anymore. So we had to come out. And so now we're working in the central and some in the west, but mostly central and eastern Ukraine now. But we had to change our name because Donetsk stood out as, I'm just going to say stood out as the enemy, the occupation. So we changed our name to Discipling Ministries. Did that to keep the DMI because that's what we're known by. People didn't call us Donetsk Ministry, it was DMI. And so that way we had to figure out what we call it. So that's who we are. And I want to introduce Sasha Malov now to come and he's going to talk to you now about the different projects that, some of them that we're supporting today. This is his family, first of all. I'll talk about them. He won't. This is his wife, Tanya, and she's a dear, I tell you. She is a wonderful, wonderful pastor's wife. His son, Nikita, and Nastia is his daughter. And, of course, that's Sasha. He won't send me a new picture. You know, this was an old one.
It's from 5 years ago.
5 years ago.
Yeah.
That's still old. But I had the privilege a couple of years ago of marrying his daughter when I was over there. And that was a joy. I've loved those two kids. And Nikita, I need to tell you something about Nikita. When Nikita was born, he had some very serious health problems. And it was so serious they didn't know if he was going to really live or not. And we were over there on one of our trips, and we just got aside with Nikita. We prayed for that boy. We prayed over him. And he is a strong, healthy young man today. And we praise the Lord for that. And just thank the Lord for his blessings in that young man's life. Keep praying for him. You know, he's a teenager, and he needs our prayers. So you just keep praying for him, all right? All right. So.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'll try to speak slow and loud in order for you to understand what you understand that English is not my native language, but I'll do my best. And if you don't understand, if you will not understand something, you may ask me afterwards. We've been praying today. I've been praying, and I know that brothers Pat and Craig, they were praying as well. And before we arrived here, we stopped and we prayed together. And you know, to go to the new church for the first time, to go to the new state for the first time. This is my first time in Alabama, and I really enjoyed being here. And I always nervous because you never know what kind of people are those, you know, what is the church like, what kind of issues this congregation is facing. Is this a growing church, or let's say not growing church? Let's put it this way. And I've been praying, and then we talked a little bit, and we discussed that the report we are given tonight is not about the church in Ukraine. It's not about the ministry in Ukraine. It's about God's universal church. Because, you know, sometimes we kind of feel like, well, in that specific area, the church is, in some specific area, the church is in decline. In that another area, the church is on growth, and we kind of feel ourselves often not really happy with the things which are happening with our own congregations. And I'm speaking about primitive Baptist churches because I see a lot of churches are not growing or even dying. And that is my pain. That is my pain because, you know, I want to see churches growing and prosperous. But if you look at the book of Revelation, if you look at the message to the 7 churches, you may recognize that, you know, there were some churches which were, you know, full of love, full of compassion, doing the good works. Some churches were other churches were absolutely not godly. And, you know, it says about church who forgot its first love. It speaks about church in Laodicea as a lukewarm church. And some people have the tendency to think that, well, you know, I'm not going into deep theological discussion, but some people have the tendency to think that, well, it describes, you know, different periods in the life of the church. There was a period of, you know, lukewarm church. There was a period of Philadelphia church, you know, full of love, of brotherly love, and so on. But the point is that nowadays we have all kinds of different churches. We may have one church full of love and commitment to the Lord, and one block apart we'll have the Laodicea church. It's more than that. Even in one church, in one congregation, we might have different people seated together on the same pew, listen to the same sermon, but one of them is experienced the first love to God, and another is lost it and never, and even don't remember how was that, the days or the times of the first love. So our report is not about Ukraine, it's about what God is doing throughout the world. We are not, some people told me before we started, some people said that, well, we are so blessed in America with the prosperity that we've got everything what we needed, but spiritual climate is not as good as it was. Well, we are not to tell that, because if you look at Ukraine, we have all kinds of people as well among the Christians. We have people who are think they are rich, but they are not, and we have people who have nothing, but who enrich, many. So that's why this is the report, not to make you feel bad about your churches here, but this is in order to rejoice about what God does in His church throughout the world. So the church is not dying. The church is not in decline. That's where I'm standing, and that's the local congregations may die, but the church in general will stay forever.
Amen.
Amen.
And that's my joy. This is my joy to report. And I just want to speak briefly about some of the projects. If you look at our ministry in Ukraine, we may divide ministry in three major groups or three major categories. Ministry to ministers. By that we mean that we need young people. We need younger people to get into the ministry. This is something where I started my ministry. I got married when I was 19, and I started my ministry when I was 18. So, and we went as a church planters to Russia, from Ukraine to Russia, and we've experienced the church was planted. And the thing I've experienced over those years of my ministry of the mission fields was that I was lonely. I was lonely because we were in the remote area, in the Republic of Kalmykia in Russia, with no Christians at all, and with this small group of young Christians who just got converted. And they've been facing their issues as new converted. And I've been facing my issues as a new pastor, as a new minister. And I regret a lot that at that time I just physically didn't have opportunity for somebody to have next to me, to help, to support, to pray, to teach, to give instructions, and also not only in the questions related to the ministry, but in the questions related, say, to the family life, because we were just new married. We were kind of going through these first, years of our life, and we just celebrated being apart from each other. We just celebrated our silver anniversary of 25 of the. I've been gone. I've been here, and she was at home. So, but September 19th was our silver anniversary. So I needed somebody, and years after, we have that understanding that for those younger pastors, younger ministers, hopefully I'll be 45 this year. And, the thing is that I'm still relatively young, probably. Yeah.
Amen.
Really. But with the experience I'm blessed. With the experience I'm blessed with, I feel like, and some of my friends about the same age or a bit older, we feel like we are not to keep our experience by ourselves. We want to help younger people. So we're going to ministers, we spend some time with them, we preach in their churches, we deal with different congregational issues, and we are not like the bishops. It's not that system. We are more like friends and probably older brothers who are coming and helping and serving. A lot of the second sphere of our ministry is ministry to poor people. Ukraine remains very poor state, and especially if you go to those areas affected by the war, by the military conflict, if you're going to the smaller towns, people often don't have enough funds, don't have jobs to survive. And we help to thousands of people every year with all kinds of programs. Like we have daycare centers where kids may come and receive food, hot meals, receive Bible instructions, receive some hygiene. A lot of families, they don't have any how you call that, no bath, no shower at their homes. So we help local churches to have a shower, to install a shower in on their facilities, where kids may take shower, and they have washing machine where they can wash their clothing. And then next, which is related to the first one, is oversight and consulting. There are people, and I praise God, that there are people who wants to do something for the Lord. Something like to start new ministry. They have a burden, like to go to the addicted people, to the homeless people, to the poor families, to the orphans, and so on. And they want to start their ministry. But often they don't. Amen. It's a good sign. But often they don't have any ideas how to start, where to get the money from, how to raise up local support, how to get other people involved, how to build up a team, how to solve the conflicts. And me and my friends and my staff, we do a lot in helping ministries to get established. We don't want, some people say that, well, it's easy for you probably, or more kind of prestigious, to have more and more ministries under your umbrella, but it's not the way we want to go. We want them to develop. We don't want DMI or Light Resurrection to become big, huge, and so on, because it's the way to nowhere. The way is to help them develop, to help them to grow. And that's where we spend a lot of our efforts. And a couple examples. This pastor, Maxim, he is a dear friend of mine, and he's got converted when he was probably, he's 51 or 52 now. He's got converted when he was probably 35 or 35 years old. And he had a burden right away to plant a church. And since he is from high-class family, in our society, he really wanted to reach to the educated people, to the white collars, and he tried for several years. And finally he's got his small congregation of 20-something people, and the congregation that congregation was not growing, and he had those mixed feelings about, oh Lord, I'm trying, I'm doing my best, I'm spending hours and hours in trying to reach out to people, but no response. And then he met one young man whom he knew and who lived in the same district of the city where he lived. And that man was under drugs, and he spent in prison several years, and he was literally dying. He was literally dying. He had no hope because he could not control himself. His mom asked Maxim to do something with that young man. And what they done, and when Maxim approached us, he asked us for one thing. That was 10 years ago. He asked us for one thing, to help him to financially, with a small amount of money, to rent a house in the village. In the remote village, in order to start their Christian rehabilitation program for those young men dying of drugs, from drugs and from alcohol. And we helped. And that was the beginning of one of the best ministries, Christian outreaches to the homeless, prisoners, addicted, and other people. Today, this past May, we were in that area, My brother Pat has preached there. And today, there are 7 locations